Well, hello everyone, this is CJ with Cycletron. Well, I said I was going to do a review of my 2020 Katana. My wife bought it for me last month. I wanted to get a few hundred miles under my belt before I did any type of review. So here we are. I really love this bike. I was looking for a more modern sport bike. I still have my Copart Special, my 2005 Yamaha 600R, but wanted something that was a little bit newer and a little bit more power. This bike produces 150 horsepower at 10,000 RPM and 80 foot-pounds of torque at 9,500 RPM. The Red 9's 11,500 RPM. So that's about 40 horsepower more than the original Katana and about 10 foot-pounds more torque than the original Katana. This bike weighs 475 pounds. About 50 pounds less than the original Katana. This bike's very smooth. It's based on a 2016 Suzuki GSX 1000, 999cc inline 4 engine, liquid cooled, chain drive, 6-speed. I like the retro looks of this bike. I like the LED backlit LCD screen, kind of interesting look. If you remember the 80s very well, like I do, it's quite a throwback. If you like the 80s styling, this bike's a nod to that. Of course, the original Katana came out in the early 80s. I tend to be drawn to more unusual looking bikes. This bike didn't sell very well. It came out in August of 2019. As I mentioned, I just bought mine last month. Up until a month ago, they were still pretty plentiful in dealer showrooms. In fact, Suzuki still has a $2,000 rebate for unloading these bikes. That's what I got when I bought it. So the bike retails for $13,500. It comes with a $2,000 rebate, and they usually charge you $400 for freight. Of course, nowadays with bikes in short supply, you're not going to get much of a deal beyond that. But $2,000 rebate's pretty healthy. You know, I think the reason why this bike didn't sell very well is, one, the looks weren't for everybody. Two, the seat height's 32.5 inches, which is kind of high for some people. And three, the fuel range is pretty modest. It has a 3.18 gallon fuel tank. I've been averaging around 40 miles a gallon, so that means dead empty's around 130 miles. So I've been generally looking for the gas station around 100-mile mark. But for around town or not too far out of town, where you know you're going to have plenty of gas stations, this is fine. I mean, honestly, this is a comparable range to what the Harley-Davidson Livewire has, but it only takes me a couple minutes to top off with fuel versus an hour plus to charge a Livewire. So I'd much rather have a limited range gas-powered motorcycle than a limited range electric motorcycle. But that's just me. So why did I get this bike? I mean, it has loads of power. I have yet to do a track day. I'm not dragging my knee around curves in my local area. It's just fun to have a lot of power, and it's extremely smooth. The fueling is very good on this bike. It's not snatchy at all like you get in some modern bikes. The seat's been comfortable for me. The riding position's good. Even though it's a naked bike, I don't get a tremendous amount of wind blast. I've had that with different bikes, naked bikes. Like I had a Ducati X Diavel S, and there was hardly any wind blast on my upper body from that bike. I think the way the fork and the headlamp and everything was designed, it did channel quite a bit of air over, and that's what this one did. I had a 2014 FC09, and the wind blast was horrible on that bike. I don't know what the deal was with that, but the bike was fun otherwise. But this bike's a great overall bike. Again, I like the looks. I'd say things that are irksome or just noticeable, I guess. There's quite a bit of vibration transmitted through the seat and the pegs at 5,000 RPM and again around 7,200 RPM. It's not what I would say annoying, but it's just noticeable. And I don't like the rear fender design. It's got that huge cutout where there's about a foot gap in the fender over the top of the rear tire. My ex-Diavel S had that as well. You know, that's great if you live in Southern California where you average 14 inches of precipitation a year. Where I live here in the Midwest, we get about 42 inches of precipitation a year. So if you have one of those open cut fenders like that and you go through any amount of water on the roadway, you get grime all over your bike pretty quickly. So I don't know, I don't get that. I guess it's kind of cool to expose the rear tire like that, but I prefer a little more functionality. I would say if this bike had a 3.5 gallon tank instead of barely 3.2, that would be a little bit better. But again, I think they made some trade-offs to improve the looks of the bike and the styling and to try and match the retro styling of the original Katana. There's still quite a few of these bikes out there on CycleTrader. Some advertised as low as 9,300 bucks, but I'm pretty sure that's clickbait for a new bike. They're probably already accounting for the $2,000 rebate. I think if, I mean, there's still a number of them out there, maybe 20 new Katanas on CycleTrader anyway. I think you could expect to be paying around 11.5 plus the freight, so around 12 grand plus any local sales taxes that you might have, which is still pretty solid. I mean, I mentioned the Livewire earlier. This bike is a little more than a third the cost of a Livewire. Of course, the new generation, I guess, is going to be around 24,000, so it's half the cost of a new Livewire. But this bike has a lot of get up and go. I can run it to 11,500 just in first gear. Top speed on this bike supposedly around 160 miles an hour. I mean, I rarely, oh, I'd say pretty much every bike I own, I'll get to 100 miles an hour at some point, and I'm good. That's like for a few seconds. And if I'm cruising fast on the highway, it might be 80, 85. That's pretty much all I'll do, whether I'm on my Harley or a sport bike. Now, this bike's got loads of acceleration. On paper, it's 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds. 30 miles an hour to zero braking is about 33 feet. And 60 miles an hour to zero braking is about 133 feet. So this bike's got great performance. It's got dual disc 4-pot Brembos up front and single disc dual pot Nissan in the back. It's got 4.7 inches of front suspension travel and 5.1 in the rear. I really like the LED screen. That's my favorite feature of this bike, and you could adjust the brightness on it. I want to ride this bike at night sometime. I seldom ride at night though. My night vision isn't so great, but I'm gonna have to do that pretty soon. But yeah, the 0 to 60 3.2 seconds, that's pretty quick. And with such a high red light, you can just keep it in first gear and just ring it out. Now for me, in town, I'm not going crazy on this thing, but it is nice to basically get that whole shot at stoplights to be able to compete effectively with the minivan and SUV drivers in my area. I swear there's a lot of people that just completely floor it from stop to stop where I live. I'm not quite sure why that is. I prefer to get away from the pack and then just slow down to the speed limit or around the speed limit. And of course, be able to roll on, get out of people's blind spots is nice. So let me know what you think. Would you ever consider getting a bike like this? As I mentioned, this bike's got 150 horsepower, which I think is the practical upper limit on horsepower for a street bike. You know, a lot of these big sport bikes now have 200 horsepower, but to make them streetable, there's all kinds of electronic intervention. So I don't see the point of spending all the extra money to get a 200 horsepower bike if you're just going to have to dumb it all down with electronics anyway. Now, if you're going to take a bike like that and take it to the track periodically, then that's a different story. The other thing is, once you've had a sport bike with this kind of horsepower, it's hard to move away from it, unless you're just interested in pure touring. I mean, that's a different animal, that's a different style of riding. But when you get older, if you're able to have a touring bike and a sport bike, it's great to have both. You know, different style of riding. But I have to say, really, even though this is a sport bike, I kind of ride it like a cruiser anyway. Like I said, I'm not getting real crazy with it. So what do you think out there? Would you consider getting a sport bike even as a second bike, particularly if you're older? Do you remember the old Katana? Do you think Suzuki did a good job recreating that bike? This bike handles so effortlessly. I mean, at 475 pounds, it's just, you just kind of think about where you want to go, and that's where it goes. It doesn't take a lot of effort, not a lot of steering input. The controls are very easy to operate, pretty light touch on the pull. So thanks for watching, everyone, and please let me know what you think in the comments section, and please be on the lookout for future videos.